intimidate some people,
Oh.
you know, because they'll be kind of loud and
Right.
braggadocious, and I'll go right back at them, and we'll go back and forth and start laughing about it, where some people might, consider they were totally out of order. But coming from where I come from and coming from a different culture, I realize that you react differently to different situations when you come from a certain place. So some people use an overreaction when they're in a nervous place or an uncomfortable place, because that's the reaction that they've learned works. And I like to try to make it lighthearted, and then you turn it into something else and let them know that they're okay where they are. So that's one of the benefits I have from coming from a different culture. I always look at where people come from and what might be the influences in their lives, because I know how I felt. As a student, I sat in the back of the room, and waited for the play. Let's just get out of here. I played the tough guy as much as I could, because that was my reaction to the world. It was the way that I could get over. So coming from where I come from, and I came from a kind of a rough bunch of people. My old uncles were they'd put a knife on you in a minute when they were young. Yeah, that's the way they got along.
Right.
See, the old Cajun culture, if you had a dispute with somebody, you do this. You do that, then you tie your hands together.
Okay.
And then you take a knife.
Oh, jeez.
And you'd start fighting with each other.
Holding on to each other.
Holding on to each other, so you couldn't get away. And whoever bleeds the most loses.
Right.
So,
that's pretty tough, I must say.
Yeah. So there was some rough old birds. My dad was a pretty tough guy. He was a gentle soul, but you didn't mess with him.
Okay.
But they were of that period in Louisiana, and they were always like behind everyone else. So my dad said when he was young, they didn't have roads prior to World War II. They pretty much cut their way through things and made their own way. So it was more like the United States 50 years before. And so they grew up very self-sufficient, and they pretty much could do for themselves. They didn't look to outside people for anything unless they had to. I think a doctor is probably the only person that ever came to fix anything at our house.
Okay.
We didn't have running water or a bathroom until I was 12 years old. So, it was roughing it.
Yeah, definitely.
The interesting part of it is you never noticed it.
Because
the other thing about our culture is the closeness of family.
Okay.
And the importance of caring and loving for each other and taking care of each other. We never noticed we were that darn poor, because it felt like, well, we got everything we need.
Right.
We're eating, we have a warm place to sleep, we have fun with each other, and that's in Southwest Louisiana. The philosophy is le joie de vivre, the joy of life, is what they go by, rather than how much I have. It's how much fun can I have, how much enjoyment can I have out of my life, rather than how much can I own.
Right.
So
That's beautiful.
The thing that I think, and I tell people I grew up poor, and I'm very happy that I did, because what it does for me is allows me to know what I can do without.
Yeah.
And there's a certain fearlessness you get with that. And I think that's one of the things. If you go from culturally to politically, people are controlled now by companies that pretty much can frighten you into doing anything because you'll lose your job.
Yeah.
My father left his boss in the bottom of a dry well.
Right.
One time. And said, see, Dad had kind of a tricky back. And they were digging out a dry well with a bucket and a shovel, and his boss was in the hole. And Dad was with him. Dad was a mechanic, but he didn't have any work to do. He said, come along, help me with that. So he was pulling the bucket, 5-gallon bucket of dirt out. And Dad said, I don't want to throw my back,
Right.
just fill it maybe 3/4 full. Guy filled it all the way. Dad dumped it. He told him one more time. Guy filled it all the way. He dumped it, left him in the hole, and went home for dinner.
Oh, jeez.
But that's the way they were. There was a certain independence that you get from knowing that no matter what you do, you've been self-sufficient enough, you've learned enough things, you're always going to find a way to make a living. And that's sort of the way they brought me up, because I look at it and I see people in this, I'll call it an industrialized culture, that are so dependent
Right.
on other people, on companies to make sure they're making a living, on people to fix things for them. That was just alien to me when I was a kid. We just did for ourselves, and we took care of each other. And if my uncle or my cousin down the road needed something, we'd jump in the car, jump in the truck, and go down, and we'd be doing it too. And it was sort of this little culture that grew up, in every little lane that we lived on.
Right.
So it was a different time, different place, that way of living really does affect you if you get to do it. It really gives you a different outlook on life and outlook on people.
Kind of molds who you are.
And it definitely does. It definitely does. I think everybody's a product of where they come from. Of the kindness or evil that you've been experiencing is going to do something to your soul somewhere along the line. But
because I can see some in our students, the kindness. Like sometimes it doesn't matter how much money some of them have. They'll just
give.
Right. And, big families.
Sure.
Sometimes who aren't necessarily related.
Right.
But still.
Extended.
Yes.
I read a book years ago that I really loved. It was called Blue Highways. And it was in the 1990s. It was Missouri. He was a professor at the University of Missouri. His name was William Least Heat Moon. He was of Native American descent. And in the same year, he lost his job and his wife. And he bought an old van and fitted it out. And he drove all the way around the United States. And he only drove on the blue highways on the map, the secondary highways. So he called it Blue Highways because black elk, he's the main subject of black elk speaks. He was a Native American medicine man, and he always says, always take the blue roads. Never take the red roads, always take the blue roads. So he decided to take the blue roads, and he drove all the way around the United States. He went through my hometown in Louisiana and all the way around.
Really?
And one thing that he came to understand at the end, that the poorest people were the most generous people.
Oh, yeah.
That he found. And I found that true, where I come from. It's just the way it is. People that have money want to keep money.
Yeah.
People that don't necessarily have it, it's not the biggest thing in their lives,
Right.
So, and that's sort of where I came from.
I think it's been proven, through data analysis even.
I think if you look at happiness, degrees of happiness.
Yeah.
That people find their happinesses in different ways, and sometimes material happiness is just, some artificial sort of thing.
Yeah.
But, to really, I think, to have true joy in your heart, you have to find out that you don't have to have anything to have that.
Yeah.
The old Jimmy Buffett quote, he said, happiness isn't getting what you want, it's wanting what you got.
Yep.
I think that's really true. And that's what I learned from my background, that just being a barefoot kid running around in, the fields and woods in Louisiana, we found real joy in life.
Good. So how did you find the transition from that to where you are now?
Well, there were a few shocks along the way. I had never left Southwest Louisiana except one time. We took a trip to Florida to visit my sister when her husband was in the Navy.
Okay.
And my next
older
excursion
sister
out, when I was 17, I joined the Marine Corps.
Okay.
So that was a real shock to the system in itself. And just being in northern countries and experiencing different people was sort of a shock to me too. The different attitudes, different ways of life. I don't think it's changed the way I looked at things very much.
Okay.
You know,
That's-
still money's a secondary thing.